We're live. Let's.
Hello. Folks, if you're watching, we are just getting our ducks in a row here. This is the first time we've done a live episode on Reason to Resist, so if you could just bear with us for 1 second.
Okay. So let's just wait until there's like at least 5 people.
Okay, I think we're live. I can see us on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, shall we begin?
Let me see if we're doing good on YouTube. Okay, yeah, we're good on YouTube as well. Okay. Yeah, we're doing
okay,
good.
Great. So welcome everybody to our inaugural live stream of Reason to Resist. I launched this channel late last year, and until now we have not ventured into this technological forest called live streaming, but we're looking forward to doing our first live stream today with my guests. Laith Marouf is probably well known to you if you've watched prior episodes of Reason to Resist. He is a geopolitical analyst extraordinaire based in Beirut, Lebanon, and is the executive director of Free Palestine TV, which is doing vitally important reporting in Lebanon, and particularly in the south and the east of the country, where most of the Israeli bombardments have occurred. And also, Free Palestine TV now has reporters on the ground in the West Bank. And they are confronting a variety of challenges you can imagine. So, Laith, first of all, welcome back to the program, and I'm glad to see that you're safe.
Thank you for having me. Great to be with you, Dimitri and Rami.
Now, Rami Yahya is new to my audience, although he and I have known each other for 8 or 9 years now. I met Rami in Montreal, where I am based most of the time. And Rami is a Palestinian Canadian. He's a graduate of Concordia University, and there he was very active in the Palestinian Solidarity movement. And since graduating from Concordia, he's had a rather unusual and adventuresome life, and is now branching out into journalism. Rami, why don't you tell us some more about your background, and in particular some of the unusual places you've been to in the last several years?
Of course. So I've been quite infatuated by the post-Soviet world. So right around the time of the end of the pandemic, I've been kind of traveling across the Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, but also I was in Ukraine and left around the time, the day that the special military operation started. And I have a special place in my heart for Transnistria, Tiraspol, which I spent quite a lot of time there as well. So, and also, Dimitri, I've been kind of supporting you with your show as well, helping booking interviews. And coming soon, hopefully tomorrow, we should be publishing a little report that I made on the U.S. meddling in the U.S. in the Georgia elections that occurred a week or so ago.
So Rami was actually in Georgia at the time of the election, and interviewed a number of political actors on the ground. So we'll be publishing his report shortly. It may not have been clear entirely from what he said, but he was actually in Ukraine at the time that Russia's military intervention began in February of 2022. And if you don't know where Transnistria is, a lot of people don't. It's a little sliver of land in what is considered by the international community to be Moldova. It's sandwiched between Moldova and Ukraine, very close to Odessa. And it is populated by a population that is very loyal to Russia, and it happens to have a huge store of ammunition there, which I think dates from the Cold War era. So
Actually,
somehow miraculously, Transnistria has avoided becoming embroiled in this war yet, Rami. Maybe you could say a word about that.
yeah.
That's really quite
So
some.
they're actually they have a like their defense doctrine is well they have a the largest concentration of explosives in all of Europe, and in some way, it's their form of deterrence. If ever a threat would come over to Transnistria, they could detonate the entire explosives, and in some way, well, it would just cause too much destruction. So this is why I believe early on in the early days of the Ukraine war, there was speculation that maybe Ukraine would be attacking Tiraspol, Transnistria, and it just seemed that there was no feasibility to this. So that's quite a special place, yeah.
Right. So with that, we'd like to turn to the subject of Lebanon. We're going to, first of all, invite our colleague and friend Laith to update us on that. And before you do that, Laith, I just want to give people an overview of what I understand the major recent developments to have been. This morning, the Islamic Resistance reported that it conducted 27 military operations against Israeli forces yesterday, Saturday, November 9th. This is far above the average number of daily military attacks it reported conducting prior to the commencement of Israel's ground operations in South Lebanon, which started in early October. By my estimation, prior to that time, the Islamic Resistance was doing somewhere in the range of 10 to 15 military operations per day. So what is clearly happening is that there has actually been an escalation in military operations by the Islamic Resistance since the ground incursion began. And the whole point of the ground incursion was to put an end to the resistance's attacks on northern occupied Palestine military bases of Israel. So clearly that has not succeeded thus far. And another point I want to make about this, many of yesterday's attacks were on targets that the resistance was not attacking prior to the commencement of Israel's ground operations. For example, the Malam military factory, which produces apparently air defense and missile systems, located 132 kilometers south of the Lebanese Palestinian border, actually south of Tel Aviv. So that's quite a distance for the resistance forces to be striking a military factory. One other thing I want to say before I invite Laith to update us is that according to Israel's statistics, October was the worst month for military deaths this year for the Israeli forces. According to Israel's military, at least 62 soldiers were killed since the start of October, making it the deadliest month for the Israeli military since December of last year, when 110 Israeli soldiers were killed, mostly in Gaza. In October, at least 35 Israeli soldiers were killed in South Lebanon or on the Lebanese border. The Islamic Resistance has said that it in fact killed more than 90 Israeli soldiers. According to Israel's figures, at least 19 Israeli soldiers were killed in October in Gaza. Now, as to this discrepancy between the casualty figures from the resistance and those of Israel, there was an interesting interview given by the main opposition leader, Yair Lapid, in Israel to Israel's Channel 12 News this past Monday. He said that in total, 890 Israeli soldiers had been killed and 11,000 injured since October 7th last year. And then he added cryptically, quote, "There are limits to how much we accept the alternative facts," close quote. So, Laith, with that as background, please bring us up to date on the developments you consider to be most significant since we last spoke to you a couple of weeks ago.
Well, clearly, we had the speech by the new Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sayyid Naim Qasim. And in his latest speech, he laid out the reality on the ground and prepared the Lebanese people for a long war. He said this war is not going to end anytime soon, that this is a bone crushing war that will have only a victor and a loser. And then he described the battles on the ground. You know, as we know, uh, Hezbollah fighters that are deployed on the front are around only 6,000, and they are facing five corps of the
Hmm.
Israeli military, which means, 100 and somewhat thousand Israeli soldiers, and they have been able to hold the invading force at a standstill, unable to occupy any of the Palestinian Lebanese villages that are on the front lines. The What we can see from the videos that were released also in the last few days, by the way, there was a video that Hezbollah released that specifically deals with this discrepancy in reporting of Israeli soldiers being killed and or injured on the border. I think it was called "Nobody Was Injured," and it was a montage of Hezbollah attacks on Israeli soldiers in trying to invade the south of Lebanon. And in that video, you can see tens of Israeli soldiers clearly being hit directly by ATGMs and other weapons. And so you can just from those videos count what much way more than what the Israelis are claiming. And those are the operations that are filmed are a fraction of the operations that are conducted on a daily basis. So uh, looking at the fact that after 45 days the Israelis haven't been able to hold any territory in the south of Lebanon, it must have meant that they had huge losses. There's no way you try to invade for 45 days and you're still losing if you don't lose men on the ground. Uh, and we've seen videos, if some of our viewers remember, a few weeks ago of a Hezbollah fighter that's being monitored by you know surveillance, and he's fighting a whole platoon by himself with fire coming at him from all directions, and you could see the bullets hitting the wall around him, under him, and he's steadfast, not even flinching. So this is the kind of quality of the warriors of Hezbollah in comparison to the Israeli soldiers that we saw running in the streets of Amsterdam, getting whipped and thrown in the rivers by unarmed civilians when they're facing an opponent that's without an air cover with F-16s. There's a lot that has happened, of course, here in Lebanon, including the targeting of historical sites in Baalbek. This is one of the oldest ruins in the world, and the Israelis are targeting both the ruins there and the ruins in Sur and Tir in the south of Lebanon. They've destroyed practically all of the city of um, uh, Nabatea in the south that we visited together earlier in the year, Dimitri. And they continue to target civilians. We went to and visited today a little village that's 2 hours up the mountain from Jbeil, a very isolated village that was attacked this morning. A house that's 100 years old, very also again heritage site that a family, an extended family, was staying in of internally displaced. 32 civilians, almost all women and children, were martyred in this attack. Their bodies were thrown on the side of the mountain that had to be collected in pieces. So we see the failure of the Israelis on the battlefield is always followed by the Zionists targeting civilians and uh, infrastructure and archaeological sites to vent out their impotency at the battlefield.
Laith, before we continue, I understand some people are having some difficulty hearing you and Rami, so perhaps you could increase your volume. I don't know if that's possible.
Sorry, Dimitri. I believe the audio gets better when you mute yourself. So I think whenever we're not talking, we should mute ourselves.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. So, Laith, there was some kind of a kidnapping that took place in an area called Batroun. Can you tell us about that? What is the Israeli version, and what do you understand actually happened?
Yes, so there, Batroun is in the north of Lebanon on the coast. It's just south of Tripoli or Tarablos. And it's a resort town. There's also a very famous museum there, the Nabu Museum. And it has a naval sciences college academy also in the city. So the Zionists claim that they kidnapped one of Hezbollah's officers for their navy. And so what happened is an Israeli force landed on the campus of the college and kidnapped this guy from the residences. And according to his employers and the family, he is a civilian captain that usually mans ships that are carrying livestock and cars. And he has been a casually every couple of years taking, of course, courses at this college to keep up his credentials for the changes in technology and so on in naval, uh, sciences. So he was kidnapped by this special force. Now, the what we know is that the Israeli special force couldn't have come all the way from occupied Palestine to this location in the north of Lebanon on the coast without having some kind of help. Number one is they can't drive a dinghy all the way on the coastline. And there is a UNIFIL Navy force that is supposed to be patrolling the waters of Lebanon. And this force is now being, you know, uh, this 6 months period or whatever it is German Navy. We've seen the German Navy shoot down or attempt to shoot down Hezbollah drones flying towards occupied Palestine, but we never saw them shoot down or try to shoot down Israeli drones or jets that are violating Lebanese territory. So it is clear that the German Navy was involved in this operation. The dinghy with the kidnapped Lebanese civilian was probably went to the German destroyer that was parked across the waters from Batroun at the time. It's available on the maps. People can see that it was available there. And finally, the biggest issue that was discussed in Lebanon and has been discussed nonstop since this is the failures of the Lebanese military, who run also Coast Guard in the area specifically because Tarablos, Tripoli, is one of the main points where illegal refugees going on boats that are Syrian, Iraqi, and Lebanese, Palestinian to try to go to Greece and Turkey or Cyprus happens almost on a daily basis. And these Lebanese Coast Guard always stop them. So how come these Israeli special force was able to get through them too, which is now brought out a lot of voices from politicians in Lebanon demanding the resignation of the head of the Lebanese military and or his public apology for their failures to protect this area, Batroun, which is, by the way, a Christian town. It's not anywhere near a Hezbollah protected area. Don't
Sorry,
forget your mic.
Dimitri, you're on mute. But Laith, just looking back at the news reports since the 2nd of November when the kidnapping happened, is there anything that we're aware of right now of the fate of Madam Haz, the man who was kidnapped?
No updates yet. Clearly, the Israelis have him. They didn't update us on his situation, and the International Red Cross agency failed again to provide any information to the family and or the state of Lebanon. They've been failing throughout this genocide. The Red Cross have never condemned yet the genocide in Gaza. So I don't know what to say more than that. It's all now uh, depending on what Hezbollah can do to free this man. I think that Hezbollah now has a higher impetus to capture Israeli soldiers alive in the front battle lines.
Can you do you have a view, Laith, as to why they kidnapped this individual? Have they told us, or if not, what is your belief as to why they did this?
Well, they're just claiming that he's some high operative within Hezbollah's naval forces. Um, you know, maybe they have some wrong information. Somebody fed them some wrong information, but you look at this man's history, his work, you know, contracts, the times he was serving on different ships. It's clear that he has no time to be an operative of Hezbollah, and most of his time is not in the country because he's sailing. The Israelis showed two passports or whatever it is to claim that he has some identities, but the passports had the same name, and it's one of the passports is the passports that are specifically made for sailors and sea captains that you have to present in ports of entry that is separate from the regular national passports that most people carry. It was the evidence that they tried to put in the media, the Israeli media, was almost as ridiculous as the pointing at the calendar of the week and the names of the days of the week under the Shifa hospital when the Zionists were claiming those were the names of Hamas operatives.
Now, you mentioned the Lebanese army. I'm just curious, Laith, is there a draft in Lebanon? Is military service obligatory?
It used to be. It is not currently. And most people want it to be back. But truly, like, the Lebanese army doesn't have weapons to actually give to these soldiers. Even now, when many of these soldiers practically they don't even use blanks when they're training. They're like go poo poo, with the guns that they have because they have nothing to use even for training these soldiers. So most people that go to service in Lebanon is because they have no other choice for an income.
Right. Now, let's turn to the West Bank. What are the major stories your reporters on the ground have been following in the past week?
It's constant invasions in most of the towns and refugee camps in both the north and the south of the West Bank. And over and over pogroms in the remote villages conducted by those hooligan fascist colonists in the West Bank. So this is consistent, and sometimes with all the extra non-stop genocide happening in Gaza, the eyes are totally distracted away, and the news headlines are distracted from what's happening in the West Bank. But as we see from the 7-8 reports that we're getting every day from the West Bank, it is nonstop attacks. Yesterday there was a story that came out of two children that were martyred in the Ramallah region. We had, there was another story of a family, a mother and her kids that were held basically hostage in a house by the Israeli invading force. And the house was being shot up at. And every day there's those attacks in the villages by the Israeli settlers.
And let's turn now to Israeli domestic politics, Laith, as I'm sure you know and have had time to cogitate about. The war criminal Netanyahu has dismissed Yoav Gallant, his fellow war criminal. Both of them are the subject of applications for arrest warrants at the International Criminal Court, which is a whole other soap opera, but we won't get into that for the moment. To some degree, the Western media seem to be portraying Gallant as the moderate, even though he was the character who said at the very outset of this genocide that Israel was dealing with human animals and they were going to cut off all food, water, and fuel to the Gaza concentration camp. And even though he is the subject of an arrest warrant, my perception about Gallant has always been that he's every bit as ruthless and bloodthirsty and racist as Netanyahu. But he would like to extract the hostages from Gaza and then finish the job of exterminating the Palestinian people after they've gotten the hostages out. Whereas Netanyahu doesn't want to give up anything for the hostages, and he'd be perfectly happy, not his preference, I'm sure, but he's quite prepared to sacrifice them all and complete the job of exterminating Palestinians without having to give up a single prisoner, a single hostage in any of Israel's dungeons. What is going on here? Why do you believe that Gallant was finally dismissed? And what does this signify about what is happening internally in the politics of the Zionist colony?
Well, there was always a battle inside the Zionist colony between the kind of Herzl camp, the secular Zionists that somehow call themselves secular, but there's a land that God promised it to them, and the Jabotinsky religious Zionist camp. And Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, the Kahanist, Smotrich are from the Jabotinsky camp. And what we saw with the return of Netanyahu into power was the beginning of the victory of the Jabotinsky camp. And that required a purge of basically the Herzl secular, quote unquote, Zionists. And that led to those demos that started in the streets of the Zionist colony before even the genocide began last year. Some of our viewers may remember that. And Netanyahu took advantage of the beginning of the Al-Aqsa flood to purge the Supreme Court of the old, Herzlites, and to start appointing his, religious Zionist judges there. So at that point, he had controlled both the Knesset, the government, the cabinet, and the Supreme Court. And what was left of the three pillars of the state, the Zionist colony, was the military and the security forces. And so that because of this contradiction between the political arm and the military and the security, we saw these constant clashes between Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, and the military corps. And now, after Ben Gvir created with Smotrich created these militias from the West Bank, ultra-fascist, and pushed them into the military as whole battalions and platoons that are, loyal to this ideology. We're seeing the beginning of the purge of the officer corps, within the Israeli military that are not in alignment with the religious Zionist outlook. So here is the beginning of that purge. And the minute he was removed, Netanyahu replaced them with Katz, who is openly a religious Zionist. And so we should expect that right after, very soon now, the rest of the core of the officers in the military will begin to be purged. And it will start with the higher up generals, obviously. And this will also be replicated within the Mossad, the Shabak, and the Aman, the three different security intelligence agencies. And you could imagine how already now the streets are boiling in Israel because of the previous purges of the Herzlites. And now add to it officers, generals, and soldiers that are going to be, dismissed from service, joining on the street. So the civil war in Israel is now edging to full confrontation. It's been confrontation in the streets, but without weapons, because up until now there is no soldiers or generals or officers that are also on the street demonstrating. Now, if they are kicked out, as Ben Gvir and the Smotrich and the whole Jabotinsky's camp want, this is where the danger for them of a full-out civil war happening.
I just wanted to maybe refocus our discussion on recent events that occurred on the 7th of November. Sorry, we've had a football match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv, and it seemed like, well, from reports that were from local people in Amsterdam, they've been saying that Israelis started parading through the streets, chanting well, Islamophobic or anti-Palestinian chants, as well as ripping Palestinian flags from people's houses. And there's been accounts of a taxi driver of Arab or Muslim origins being beaten up. And as a response, the citizens of Amsterdam, after seeing that there was no action taken by the police, decided to take revenge, or maybe not revenge, but to well, defend their own city by taking care of these hooligans. Now, I've attended many football matches in my life, and while there is generally sometimes you could witness some occasional racism in sports, that happens. This level of scale from Israeli hooligans is unheard of. To see this amount of their chants revolving around burning Arab children, Palestinian children's schools. I believe one of the chants mentioned there's no more schools in Gaza because there's no more children. My question to you guys is, well, how did we get to a level where, well, Israelis hooligans are being protected to the extent where they could chant racist slurs in the streets of a Western city and having police backing, and to the extent where we're watching the news now and it seems like um, the Arabs or the pro-Palestinians or the people that were defending their city are now seen as the aggressors in this specific case.
Mhm.
How do you guys explain this double standard?
Well, if I may start, Laith, because football is near and dear to my heart. I played, at the university level and aspired to be a professional footballer one day long ago. And I've been passionately following this sport. It's really the only sport I care about for many years. I knew before the events of last week that Maccabi Tel Aviv was one of the most racist football clubs in the world. This was widely known to any footballing fans who, have the slightest regard for Palestinian lives. How we got here it shouldn't be surprising, I guess, Rami, from one perspective, because after all, our governments, the entire establishment of the West is fully behind the genocidal regime and is perpetrating genocide alongside the Zionist colonists. They're both camps are not, it's not simply a question of complicity, it's full-blown involvement, enablement, participation in every conceivable sense in the genocide. So I don't think that should surprise us, for people to understand just how outrageously dishonest and hypocritical all of this was. Maccabi Tel Aviv was in Amsterdam to take part in a European football tournament called the Europa Cup. As the name implies, it is a tournament that is confined to European football clubs. Well, Israel is not in Europe. Last time I looked at the map, a country that is in Europe is Russia. And Russia's football teams have all been excluded from European competitions ever since the military intervention in Ukraine in February of 2022. They were immediately banned. And of course, the civilian casualties in Ukraine are far below the civilian casualties in Palestine. In fact, the way things are going, Lebanon is soon going to surpass Ukraine for civilian casualties if this continues for, a few months longer, even though the war in Ukraine has been going on much longer. And yet they immediately expelled Russian football clubs. And they are including the most racist clubs from Israel, even though Israel is not part of Europe. It's the most remarkable thing. Now, when I woke up on Thursday morning, I did what I normally do. I went to my Twitter feed and I saw all the usual suspects, the loudmouth, high-profile Zionists in this country, claiming that there were pogroms of Jews happening before our very eyes in Amsterdam. There was no mention. I saw this from, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. I saw it from B'nai B'rith. I saw it from Pierre Poilievre, who's likely going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada, the far-right conservative kook. Justin Trudeau soon weighed in. None of them mentioned that there was a football match anywhere in the background of all of this. None of them mentioned Maccabi Tel Aviv. None of them even said the word Israeli. They simply said Jews. So if you read their statements and you knew nothing else, you would have thought that European Jews were randomly being hunted down in the streets for no other reason than that the attackers were actuated by anti-Semitic malice. That's what you would have thought. It took me literally 1 minute of doing Google searches to figure out that in fact what had happened was, at least on the surface, based on my very preliminary research, was that these far-right racist thugs who are notorious in the footballing world had descended on the streets of Amsterdam and were engaging in racist chants, threatening Muslims. There are videos circulating with them with, carrying wooden poles, metal pipes, tearing down, as you mentioned, Palestinian flags. This is how dishonest the Western elites are. This is how hypocritical they are. This is, in the grand scheme of things, because as I understand it, nobody was killed. It isn't nearly as horrible as what is happening in Gaza and in Lebanon and in the West Bank. But the hypocrisy of this simply boggles the mind. Now I'm done ranting about this. Laith, do you have anything you want to add about this spectacle?
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is that we all of humanity watched together the events as they unrolled before these statements came out. So everybody watched the hooligans that are Israeli soldiers that, by the way, were accompanied by Mossad agents. According to Israeli media, they sent Mossad agents with the Maccabi Tel Aviv hooligans to Amsterdam. Everybody watched them run amok in the city of Amsterdam for 2 days before the match. Before the game, for 2 days, they were running amok, besieging people in their homes. Anybody that had flags, Palestinian flags, out of their windows, throwing rocks through the windows and setting fire to doors of those homes, chasing and lynching a Moroccan Dutch taxi driver. This is above and beyond those fascist genocidal chants that they were, doing all across the city. And after those attacks, that's when the Arabic and Muslim community in uh, Amsterdam who were actually experiencing a true pogrom. The pogrom that was being conducted by Israeli soldiers in the streets of Amsterdam, harassing Muslim and Arabic citizens of Holland and threatening and destroying their businesses and their private property. That was a Kristallnacht for the Arabic and Muslim community, not the other way around. And so when the Zionists sent the orders to all the Western elite to all at once, from the King of Holland to the Prime Minister of Holland to the Prime Minister of Canada, to every little, what can I call them? Little journalist and politician in the West, all of them issuing the same statement, claiming that the community defending themselves are the ones committing a pogrom or a Kristallnacht. It was really suicidal what the Western elite and the Western media did. And what the Zionists asked for was actually a suicidal thing, because the Zionists had conditioned Western audiences with cue words that usually lead to Pavlovian responses from the Western audience. One of those was the word Holocaust. And that word Holocaust lost its meaning because the whole world watched a Holocaust in Gaza being broadcasted live on social media for 14 months. Similarly, another one of those Pavlovian response words was the word anti-Semitic. And again, that word had lost completely its meaning when the Zionists were calling everyone that criticized them over the last year as anti-Semitic. There was only two words left in those conditioned Pavlovian response dictionary. One of them was the word pogrom, and the other was Kristallnacht. And they blew up those words in a suicide mission with their stupid propaganda that they demanded after the whole world watched together in the
Dimitri, I believe we're losing Laith. Am I right?
I don't see Laith either. I think Laith got so impassioned that his laptop overheated.
But Dimitri,
So,
I just wanted to mention, you mentioned the level of racism in Maccabi Tel Aviv. This racism is not exclusive to Maccabi Tel Aviv. We've noticed, or we've seen Beitar Jerusalem, which after Trump will move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, they decided to change their name for temporarily to Beitar Trump Jerusalem. Uh, they they got extremely angry when their club signed for the first time two Muslim players who happened to be from Chechnya, Dagestan, some part of Russia, and the level of racism was so unimaginable that the players ended up leaving midway or halfway through their contract before the season even ended. They were peer
yeah,
pressured to leave because the club refused to have a single Muslim player or Arab player on their roster.
right.
So there's the level of racism extends to levels that are just insane, and well, yeah, and quite
The
funny.
Israeli media, you probably know this, Rami, have been reporting for years that Beitar Jerusalem, the club you just mentioned, is the most racist football
Yeah,
club in Israel, and
and
Maccabi is number two.
yeah,
So,
and I don't think they say racist as if it's a bad thing. It's maybe a competition on who hates Muslims the most. And what's particularly interesting is well, right around the time of the match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv, Paris Saint-Germain unrolled a banner in the stands saying "Free Palestine, make war on the field, not in the not like keep war only within the field. And the French government has been debating putting sanctions and punishments on these supporters of Paris Saint-Germain, all
Mhm.
while UEFA decided that there was actually nothing wrong with these banners. So it just seems like it's insane
Right.
how Israeli hooligans could walk around chanting um, genocidal chants, targeting Arabs and hitting taxi drivers, but our focus is on messages of peace, messages calling for a free Palestine in the stands of a Paris
Yeah.
football.
And people bear in mind that if, we may hear in the days ahead that PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, is going to be penalized because politics are supposed to be kept out of the sporting arena. That may be what they tell you, but if that's true, why did they expel Russian teams from European competitions? And I could point out another fact that for an entire year, La Liga, which is one of the premier football associations in UEFA, the Union of European Football Associations, every single match that was televised, they had the Ukrainian flag up in the upper left-hand corner along with the score, the match score. This went on for over a year, every single match. So UEFA has already entered into the political arena in the case of the Ukraine war. And any claim that the PSG fans or the club itself should be punished for the fact that some fans express solidarity with the victims of a genocide, because that's mixing politics and sports, again, would be an example of egregious hypocrisy on the part of another Western institution, the sporting institution of football. So with that, Rami, maybe we should turn to the subject. Did your laptop cool down after you got all heated up? So we finished with some concluding thoughts, Laith. I think we are going to move on. We would like to talk about the U.S. election within the time remaining to us, and I think that's a subject that certainly deserves some attention. So, Rami, what do you think? What do you think we should be talking about first when it comes to this clown show that happened in the United States on November 5th?
So the elections were I mean, I remember walking through the elections, slightly believing Western media that it was going to be a tighter race. I'm someone who I don't know, and I remember we watched the elections together, right, Dimitri, in Ottawa, and I was quite came very like in the early beginning of the count, we started seeing this bigger and bigger gap happening between Trump's votes and Kamala. Now, I think it's particularly interesting when we look at the challenges that the Democrats have put on Trump to stop any form of momentum on his side or to stop his reelection. There was, first of all, the documents, the mismanagement of documents, if you want to call it this way, where Trump had classified documents in his house. They tried to prosecute him for this. Of course, there was the whole ruckus around the Capitol Hill riots, and the Democrats wanted to invoke, I believe it's Section 2 of Article 14, that says that a presidential a presidential candidate would be disqualified if they have ever participated in an insurrection. Now, keep in mind that this specific article within the Constitution um, comes from the U.S. Civil War, and it's quite unexpected that the Democrats would ever try to apply this specific um, portion of the amendment uh, in to stop a candidate to stop to for their reelection in 2024. Uh, Trump won the popular vote. He's the first Republican candidate to win the popular vote since George W. Bush. There are counties such as in Dearborn, Michigan, where Trump won 50% of the vote. Kamala barely scratched the surface with 30%. Jill Stein nearly beat Kamala Harris in Dearborn, Michigan. So I think this is such a tragic result for Kamala Harris, and I just wanted to quickly hear your first thoughts, your early thoughts on these elections, Dimitri Leith.
Let me just add a few facts, and then I'm going to ask Laith to offer his view about what happened. There's some other color that I think is very important. The popular vote, as you mentioned, Rami, is a big deal because not just because Trump outperformed other Republican candidates of the recent past, but also because the fact that he now has 50.4% of the popular vote, and that's the most recent number that I saw, means that the Democrats can't blame their loss on third-party candidates. Even if all of the votes that went to Jill Stein and Chase Oliver, the Libertarian candidate, and Cornel West and the others went to the Democrats, if they all withdrew and it all went to the Democrats, and of course that wouldn't have happened. Some of those people wouldn't have voted at all. Some of those people might have voted Republican. Some of them certainly would have. But just imagine that they all went to Kamala. She still would have lost the popular vote. Then you look at the Electoral College map, and now they've called all the states, AP, Associated Press, and it's not even close. Trump has 312 Electoral College votes to Kamala Harris's 226. He won, I think, almost all the swing states, if not all of them. They took the Senate, the Republicans did. They appear to be on the verge of taking the House. They have 213 seats to 203 for the Democrats. You need 218 for a majority. Seems very unlikely that the Democrats are going to pull that one out of the fire. This is really a disaster. It's really, I don't know how anybody could characterize this thing as other than a total debacle. And when you think about all the efforts that were made, some of which you mentioned, Rami, to prevent Trump from running or discredit him, he had 4 indictments. You mentioned 2 of them. 4 indictments filed against him in 2023, and had to fight against all of those. He was convicted for one. It involved covering up payments to a porn star, because he didn't want her to tell the truth about what had happened in their personal affairs or whatever. Now, just consider for a second that for the last year, we have been watching the Democratic administration commit genocide. Has anybody been indicted in the Biden administration? These genocidal psychopaths? Not one of them has been indicted. And yet they indicted Trump for crimes which are nowhere close to as egregious and inhumane as the ones being committed by Israel with the full backing of the Biden administration. So clearly what happened was they weaponized, politicized the Department of Justice. They did the very thing that they accused Trump of wanting to do. They weaponized the Department of Justice against him, and the social media companies basically expelled Trump. He was gone from Twitter from the time, I think, his waning days of his presidency. The corporate media absolutely despised him. And yet, and here, Laith, I'm very interested to hear your take on all of this. They annihilated, Trump and the Republicans essentially annihilated the Democrats at all levels of the federal government. Why do you think this happened, Laith?
Well, I am going to kind of go totally a different direction, which is I don't think that there is such thing as a democracy in the US, and that actually these votes meant anything. I think this is all theatrics. The elite in the United States wanted Trump to win. All this actually him being given these majorities in both houses and this vast majority in electoral votes and popular votes are all to assert that he is a legitimate representative of the empire, the emperor himself, in order that whatever actions that he has been brought into power to take will look like they actually represent the will of the people. The empire has 2 wings, and it swings between them. It has the one wing that is the liberal wing that has a good face that usually uses propaganda and influence operations and special operations and intelligence operations to force peoples around the world to comply with the directives of the empire, and sometimes that is also coupled with military operations. The other face of the empire, the other wing, is brought in when that, special operations, intelligence, influence operations don't work. You bring in the vicious mafioso, bandit, pirate face of the empire, cowboy face of the empire, that clobbers everybody into submission. And that's how the empire goes back and forth between them, depending on which one works. As we saw, the empire decided 4 years ago that Trump's style didn't work at that moment. They needed to kind of dose the population of the world with some sedative with the liberal face. And now that liberal face failed to, with all their scheming of, secret and special operations and assassinations and so on in Gaza and Lebanon, across the region, failed to force the Palestinians and the Lebanese people and the axis of resistance to bend over for them. Therefore, they're going to bring a guy that's supposedly gonna, rape us live on TV himself, instead of just the soldiers on the ground in Gaza. And so this is the reality in my mind. Everything else is just theatrics.
So I just want to push back a little bit on that, because I totally agree, of course, Laith, that the U.S. is not a democracy. And the question of whether this is going to change anything is an important question, which I want to talk to you about next with Rami. But if they actually wanted Trump to be elected, if the elites wanted Trump to be elected, and some of them certainly did, I have no doubt about that. For example, the widow of Sheldon Adelson reportedly gave Trump $100 million. There were other, Elon Musk, if not the wealthiest, the second wealthiest man in the world, was doing everything he could openly trying to get Trump elected. So it's absolutely clear that there was a constituency within the billionaire class that wanted Trump in office. And certainly the Zionists, the most hardcore Zionists, wanted Trump to win. But it seems to me a pretty weird way to get Trump elected, by calling him the new Hitler or a fascist or a rapist, all the things that they said about Donald Trump, which, may be completely accurate, but that's what they were saying, the Democrats, about Donald Trump. So it seems to me they were actually trying to win. The Democrats did want to win. Whether that would have changed anything is another question. And they failed miserably. And can
I show you how you're wrong there for one reason?
Sure.
Because the Democrats did everything to lose, just like the Labor Party Zionists did everything they can do to make sure that Corbyn lost the elections. And so the Zionists and the elite within the Democrats that could have chosen to side with the Palestinians, let's say, and become a totally different option, and maybe would have won, because the majority of Americans, according to the polls, are against the genocide in Gaza, do not want any weapons, American weapons. 70% of Americans do not want any sale of weapons to Israel. So for the Democrats to refuse to take a position that is anti-war in this point was them deciding they want to lose.
So with that, so let's just hone in on that issue then. It sounds to me like what you're saying is that a lot of people didn't vote for the Democrats because of the genocide. It seems to me that that's certainly my view. I think it's quite clear how many American voters didn't vote for the Democrats, but would have voted for them if they had taken a principled stand for the Palestinian people. We don't know, but there has to be a significant number of them. And I think that definitely had a major impact on the outcome of this election. Do you agree with that, Laith?
That's only if I actually believe that these elections were counted. In my mind, all of this didn't matter. But, but there's still this attempt to maintain the theatrics of it. So it was a great show. We're talking about it. We're trying to decipher the scenes in the play that doesn't have words almost, but it is a distraction to even think about it. It's not
Right.
going to change anything to the realities, not only to the Palestinians in Gaza. It's not going to change anything to the realities of American citizens on the ground. You see, if we for a second pretend that this was a true election, what was the difference between the two parties in their policies? Nothing. So if this was a real election and the majority of the American citizens, as we said, 70% want an arms embargo on the Zionist colony, see that they have no difference between the two candidates on this specific issue of Palestine, well, they might as well, they all decide, would go with Trump. At least he's not the one that's conducting the genocide right now, if there's no difference between them. And also as a punishment to the Democrats. But again, I regress to saying I don't believe that this was a real election or a democracy.
Laith, it's quite interesting that you say that this was just a charade and there was a spectacle. I think that's the word you use, Dimitri. When we were watching the election party at a pub in Ottawa, I bumped into an old university friend of mine, and he came up to me, knowing that I'm Palestinian. He said, "I don't want to talk politics with you tonight, but I feel sorry for what's going on in Palestine." Now, what shook me the most is that this is supposed to be an electoral night. It's supposed to be a political evening. To say that we're not going to talk politics quite makes it show that it's a spectacle. It's a one-sided entertainment. So yeah, it really resonated with me what you just said. However, Laith, while I agree to a certain extent that we shouldn't expect any major change for the American people, in some way the whole world depends or lives under the boot of the Americans. Maybe not the people in Gaza that are resisting, but the whoever's in power in the United States definitely has implications. And these implications might not change from an election, right? There's a lot of agency for the Pentagon, the security apparatus to carry on as business as usual, no matter who's in power. So Trump is building a transition team. Transition team has a lot of people that are very close to him, such as Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., that are quite have similar politics to him, to Donald Trump. However, we also have a man called Howard Lutnick as the co-chair, as one of the co-chairs of his transition team. Howard Lutnick mentioned that although he has donated to Trump's campaign in the past, his current stance on the genocide in Palestine pushed him to donate over $1 million and to fundraise more than $10 million through his network, which has bought him a seat at the transition table. And we're seeing a lot of names coming out for the State Department transition team that is led by Brian Hook. Brian Hook was the Iran envoy and enforced extremely hostile policies around Iran. Trump was also the administration that targeted and killed Qasem Soleimani and was a direct attack on high-level Iranian officials. And then as part of the transition team for the Pentagon, we have Robert Wilkie. After doing some research on him, he spoke about wanting to keep soldiers in Europe to deter Russia, has criticized Biden for, we all know it was all a charade here, but for threatening to put an arms embargo on Israel. So we're seeing, and I think there was also there were speculations for Secretary of State such as Richard Grenell, who was the U.S. ambassador to Germany, who was able to get Germany to designate Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. So clearly, the Trump administration is not going to be any different than his previous administration, or any different than Biden's administration. But Laith, how do you see the team that Trump is building, and how would that possibly shape the Middle East?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that have this delusion that he's going to stop wars or But it is possible that he will stop the war in Ukraine, and that's only because he wants to concentrate on the region here, Western Asia. So from now till his inauguration in January 20th, we should be expecting that Netanyahu will go buck wild and will be trying to score as many points as possible before the coming of Trump to gift him with a better hand in a possibility of negotiations of a ceasefire, and or allow him, if the United States intervene, to have an easier time clobbering the axis of resistance. So those are the illusions that are in the mind of Netanyahu and Trump. The reality on the ground here, we see that the axis of resistance is winning the battle on the ground. All the Israelis are achieving is destruction of civilian infrastructure, homes, and killing of unarmed civilians, while the battle on the ground they're losing. Similarly, the United States is losing its battle against Ansarullah in Yemen, and so we're heading to a direct confrontation between the United States and the axis of resistance, and that can only happen if the United States stops the war in Ukraine, because it cannot fight both wars. And if it's stupid enough to fight them at the same time, then then Russia will definitely get involved on the ground here, defending Syria and the rest of the axis of resistance, and we'll find ourselves in a world war very fast.
And
can I just interject here, Rami? I want to ask Laith, because it is very late in Beirut. I think it's
2:10.
2:10. So I just, because Laith has been very generous with his time at this late hour, and there is a subject I want to just quickly address with Laith before we let him go and we conclude our session today, and that is this allegation that Iran tried to kill Trump. So the background of this is that on the 8th of November, and I think always when governments, especially the United States government, makes a major announcement, the timing tells us a lot. And we should always ask ourselves, why would the government choose this moment to make this announcement? So they waited until the federal prosecutors in Manhattan until 3 days after the election, 2 days after it was known that Donald Trump was the victor, to announce that they were charging an individual by the name of Farhad Shakeri with murder for hire and providing support to the Iranian Revolutionary Guards in a plot to assassinate Trump. Now, this character, Shakeri, apparently told the FBI in interviews, this is according to an unsealed criminal complaint in the Manhattan federal court, he told them in interviews that the Iranians were approaching him and offering him large sums of money to assassinate Trump or somehow orchestrate the assassination of Trump. Well, that means that effectively Shakeri was under the jurisdiction, the power of the federal authorities at some point, and they knew at the time that they had him in their custody that he had been approached by the Iranians, but somehow he ends up in Iran, which is where he is now, according to American authorities. So that's the first thing. The timing is very odd. Why didn't they hold on to this man when they had him in their custody? The third thing is they are indicting him when he's in Iran. You can be sure that the Iranians are not going to hand him over, which means that these allegations are probably never going to be tested in an adversarial proceeding in a court of law. So they can claim whatever they want, but are they ever actually going to put forward credible, admissible evidence to back it up? That seems highly doubtful at this stage. And it's also notable that Shakeri is an Afghan national who immigrated to the U.S. as a child. And according to the complaint, he was deported in 2008 after serving 14 years in New York State prisons after a 1994 conviction for robbery. And according to prosecutors, he was cooperating with the FBI because he was trying to obtain a sentence reduction for another individual who was imprisoned in the U.S. So he had a motive to lie. So from my perspective as a lawyer, I believe in the presumption of innocence. I don't know this man. I've seen nothing to suggest that, in fact, these allegations are true. Maybe they are. I can't say they're not. But I apply the presumption of innocence until I see evidence to support these very serious allegations. And what I'm most interested in, Laith, is what do you make of this and the timing of this? One possible interpretation, just going to throw this out there, is that the U.S. authorities, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, the national security apparatus, they're a little bit concerned because Trump is a bit of a wild card. And they're not entirely sure that they can depend upon him to go to full-blown war with Iran. And they're kind of trying to box him into a corner. So once they knew that he had won, they announced they do this whole piece of theater, to basically, make Trump look bad if he doesn't become belligerent and, very aggressive towards Iran. After all, they tried to assassinate you, Mr. President, something along those lines. That's just one possible interpretation. But the timing of this does seem rather odd. And certainly the circumstances surrounding this individual are highly suspicious. What do you make of all of this, Laith?
Well, I want to note that the Iranian government, Iranian Foreign Affairs Minister, spokesman of the parliament, and so on, they all made statements, denying that there was such a plot, that Iran was involved in it, and said that this is all lies. The other thing that I was looking at some of these the positions that in the case, people were sharing a lot of different pages from them, and this man was using the N-word a lot. It seemed like, I mean, and reading his statements felt like reading somebody who has psychological issues. Okay, it wasn't a person that speaks normally. Okay, and so and of course we have a history of the FBI conducting entrapment of many different people that ended up in jail in the U.S. under the guise of terrorism, and that's the same happened in Canada, of course. So we should never trust anything that comes out of these perpetual liars that run these agencies. And in my opinion, the reason it came out now is not about trying to entrap Trump into a war. He's already entrapped into it. He already had agreed to whatever Netanyahu wants. He agreed to what Adelson wants with her $100 million that she put in his pocket. This is directed towards the American public. It's part of the propaganda campaign that we will see from now till the inauguration day. That's going to be ratcheting up the hate within the American populace against Iran. In order to, when the eventual direct confrontation between the United States and Iran happens, supposedly in the minds of these elite propagandists and so forth, the US public would be more accepting of it. You're still muted.
I'm sorry. I was saying that that is entirely plausible, even compelling interpretation of the events. I think one thing is for sure, Laith, and Rami, if you have a different view, please chime in. But it seems clear to us both that there is a war coming with Iran. And if anything, the chances of that happening went up. On November 5th, they certainly didn't go down appreciably. There's no reason to think that they did, and we remain on that trajectory, I think. Rami, do you have a different view about this?
No, absolutely not. But correct me if I'm wrong, but the man who ended up shooting Trump at his rally, did he have a manifesto, and in it he was promoting the war in Ukraine and speaking in favor of Ukraine. So it's quite funny how all of a sudden we found a Iranian guy behind all of this and scapegoating all of this on Iran, when in reality there's a lot better reasons for Ukraine or these pro-Ukraine war hawks to commit such an act. So this is just where I feel there's a lot of confusion, how we just are able to scapegoat Iran on all of this, and in some way media and the American people all rallying behind. It just feels like we're maybe getting closer to the type of warmongering that we were seeing in the early 2000s before the war in Iraq.
Mhm.
Gradually building that the consent for the war. Maybe that's just the tip of the iceberg, or the beginning, right? I mean, the warmongering for war with Iran started a long time ago, but we're seeing how it's escalating, and there's probably more going to come. So it's important for us to stay vigilant.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Laith, for staying with us until this late hour. Looks like you could use some shut-eye. We look forward to our next conversation. Please stay safe, comrade. And this is Laith Marouf, Rami Rahia, and Dimitri Lascaris signing off for Reason to Resist. Have a good night.
Have a good night too.
Guys,